Hello viewers, welcome to another exciting edition of the AAU Talks on the AAU TV. Today we are discussing the very important issue of the youth, higher education and science in Africa. My name is Felicia Kuagbedzi and I'm your host for the show. I'm joined in the studio today by a distinguished gentleman who is the global icon for growing Africa's first and largest network of centers of excellence in mathematical sciences. He is currently the president and CEO for the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences and also the chair for AIM's Next Einstein Forum, which is a global forum for science. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest on the show today is Thierry Zomahoun. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Is this your first time in Accra?
No, I've been coming to Accra for more than 30 years.
Okay.
So I always come to Accra.
That's quite a long time.
At least once every 3 months.
Okay. So what brings you here this time?
Just a follow-up business. We have a center of excellence in Accra, in Biriwa,
Okay.
in the central region. So I came in to visit, interact with the students.
Okay.
We have bright mathematical scientists who are going to graduate in June.
Okay.
They're all excited. And also to interact with my colleagues and definitely to pay a courtesy call to you here at the AAU.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are very happy to have you.
Thanks.
So for our viewers who don't really know what AIMS is about, can you please give us a brief on who AIMS is and AIMS strategy in reinventing higher education on the continent?
AIMS was founded in the early 2000s on the strong belief that Africa needs more than charity, more than social, more than just compassion to transform or develop. We founded AIMS with a strong belief that Africa needs to build its own homegrown capacity, both in science and technology. So we took stock of the past 4 or 5 decades of development on the continent. We know AIDS, we know assistance to development, we know the results today. While those initiatives were helpful to some of the African continents, at least those who have managed to manage those initiatives correctly, we strongly believe that with Africa being endowed with massive natural resources, we have the youngest population on the planet. And experts predict that in the next 3 decades, Africa is going to be home for 40% of the world's youth. They're bright, they're smart. We have vibrant entrepreneurs across the continent. But what we lack is technical and scientific capacity. So AIMS came up, originated from that assumption and that strong belief that if we train well-rounded mathematical scientists, young people, young graduates can use their skills to solve problems. I mean their mathematical skills. So we launched the first AIM Center of Excellence in South Africa, and then we added 5 centers of excellence.
Where are these?
These are, of course, South Africa, where it got started,
You've mentioned
and
Ghana.
then Ghana, and Senegal, Cameroon, Tanzania, and Rwanda. So our strategic approach is to expand AIMS across 15 countries in Africa. And what it's important to mention here is that AIMS is not just a higher education learning institution. We are a knowledge ecosystem. We want to turn each of our center of excellence in a knowledge ecosystem.
What exactly does that entail?
The knowledge ecosystem is simply that we want to tackle the critical issue of access and quality of higher education, of math and science at higher education level. So we want to make it affordable for a bright young Ghanaian to have access to cutting-edge training, master's degree training without worrying about finance, without worrying about financial barriers. We want to...
So Ghanaians as well as those in the other countries?
Absolutely. Ghanaians, because I mentioned Ghana because I'm in Ghana. Otherwise, across the country, we receive graduate students from more than 40 countries on the continent. So we want to tackle the issue of access and quality. We also want to address the issue of research and high-end research, not research confined to need-based based research.
Okay.
And then 3, we are aware that you cannot wait and sit back and expect young people to reach university, tertiary education institutions with well-equipped with science and aware of science. You need to build the pipeline from the very beginning for that. And we're aware of that. That's why we're investing heavily in revolutionizing the teacher training systems across the continent, trying to get young people from early age, from primary school, secondary, to be aware of the STEM fields, to get passionate about it, to love it, and not to see it as something that is for other people, a group of special people. 4, this is the 4th pillar of the knowledge ecosystem. We want to bridge the gap between higher education and industry, higher education and the private sector. We want to build linkages. And 5th, once we put in place all these 4 pillars within the ecosystem, we also want to talk about young Africans, genius. Africa is the world's untapped pool of genius. We want to talk about bright discoverers, inventors coming from Africa who nobody is talking about. This is why we created the platform of the Next Einstein Forum, to showcase those scientific discoveries and inventions.
There's actually a popular belief that women sort of tend to shy away from the STEM fields. Is that correct? Or is that improving?
Well, actually, I disagree when it comes to that popular belief. The higher education system, let's just say the whole education systems, be it here in Africa or in the West, has failed women for centuries. 2 examples. You have girls entering primary school. But for multiple reasons, social norms, cultural, the fact that the learning environment is not conducive to enable women to fulfill in the learning because of the machismo in the learning education systems, you alienate a number of women. When it comes to higher education, it's another level of ostracism where you have, especially in the STEM fields. STEM fields is a man-dominated field.
So the popular assumption is correct?
The popular assumption is the reason why I don't want to go for the popular assumption, because when there's a popular assumption, people just embrace it without questioning the popular assumption. You know, I'm challenging the popular assumption, saying this is a man-made popular assumption. So what we're trying to do at AIMS, this is maybe the 6 pillars of our knowledge ecosystem. We're making it conducive for women to really fulfill in mathematical science education. Concrete example, we have 40% of our alumni who are women. And I can tell you, they are the smartest of the alumni. We have bright female mathematical scientists.
That's encouraging statistics. So let's talk about the issue of, now that we're actually discussing mathematical fields, you know, there are quite a number of global challenges and quite huge numbers of challenges faced by the continent. There are issues of health, there are issues of unemployment, there are issues of so many other things. How exactly does maths come in to solve these global challenges and some of these continental challenges?
The good news is when you interact with AIMS alumni or young people of the age in the STEM fields, you realize very quickly that they have something that the generation of the 60s, just to start from 60s, the generation of the 60s and the 70s did not have in the field STEM. The young people today are aware of the development challenges of their community. So you don't need to convince them by telling them you're going to use your math and science skills to solve the problems of energy in your community, to solve the problem of malaria. They're doing it already. How is math going to make this happen, bring about this change? It's already happening. You have an example of an alumni. We have 1,600 alumni from 40 countries across Africa. So, but a couple of examples. It's this young scientist who attended AIMS, who is working, investigating what they call the mosquito dispersal on malaria transmission and vector control. This is simply means that she is trying to investigate how far can a mosquito travel from its source of emergence of its food source to cause transmit malaria, or how far can it go before it gets control. You have another mathematical scientist who came up. She is from Kenya. Came up with a model which helps mothers, parents in rural areas in Kenya for early detection of malnutrition before it gets worse. Another example of a bright Cameroonian mathematical scientist in the field of health. He is currently investigating the linkages between malaria, schistosomiasis, and HIV. Simply put, if his research is conclusive, it's going to revolutionize the health of women, and especially black women. Because schistosomiasis is not a lethal disease, but dominant with black women and among black women. And when you have it, you're more vulnerable to contracting AIDS, HIV. So these are things that are happening from young graduates across Africa who initially are not medical scientists, but are bringing math into medicine.
The equation. Mr. Zomahoun, those are very interesting findings and interesting models that your alumni are trying to come up with. But coming up with the models and the findings is one thing, and it's also being uptaken by stakeholders, by industry, by government for policy and all of that is another thing. How is the linkage between these higher education institution findings and output to industry? Is it really working? Are we really doing well in terms of university industry linkages?
I think we're not doing well. We're not doing well, and this is a big challenge that governments, private sector / industry, higher education, and investors should work on. There's a change over the past decade. We've begun to see a paradigm shift. In that some governments have come up with a strategy of building innovation cities, innovation ecosystem, knowledge ecosystem, like the one we're trying to promote. It's those innovation ecosystems or knowledge ecosystems are designed for one reason, to enhance collaboration among the higher learning education institutions, the private sector, investors, venture capitalists, policy makers, and laboratory infrastructures. But there's more to this. You can build a physical ecosystem and put different stakeholders in that ecosystem, physical ecosystem, without them necessarily interacting. So what we believe it's crucial is that researchers should continue to improve working and communicating their research output. The times where research scientists have used to working in the ivory tower, that time is gone. So because we are surrounded by communities, Africa is talking about transformation, socio-economic and industrial transformation. It cannot happen if research scientists, those who are generating ideas, are working in ivory tower. At the same time, the private sector, or let's just say industry, has been reluctant to approach research scientists.
Are they improving now?
I think it's timid. It's happening, but we would have loved this to be more aggressive. But the trend and the paradigm is shifting. So when a young graduate or young research scientist has a bright ideas, like the couple of ideas I mentioned in the health sector, how do you take that idea from lab to the market? You know, normally it's not the responsibility of the research scientist to think about commercialization through the end.
But now it's very key for research to be commercialized.
Absolutely, it's very key. So you need other stakeholders down the stream to market the ideas, but it's going to take some time. Second thing, parameter, which is important from bringing ideas from lab or research, ivory tower, whatever, to the market is the policy of the country.
Okay.
There are still countries on this continent which have policies which are not conducive for research and high-end science. So policymakers must be proactive, bringing about policies which make it conducive for young researchers to do science. And then 3, finance.
Yeah, there's always the money factor.
It's extremely important that we have had a culture, I'm not sure if I can use the word culture, of investing in things which has immediate return on investment.
Exactly.
You do import-export. You get your cash immediately. Research is not a cash. It's a long-term process.
Exactly.
So as long as investors keep thinking of making cash immediately, of course they need to make profit. But the paradigm has to change when it comes to research. And not all the investors will be interested in it, but at least there must be a clear policy, clear politics in each country for government to accompany that process.
Okay, so when we are actually talking about the university-industry linkage and the fact that industry need to uptake the findings or output from the higher education institutions, I think one other key aspect we need to look at has to do with innovation, because then they really want to know what is new or what actually is this research going to bring to my institution that is going to change something. I mean, innovation is one key aspect over there. Can we say that our youth on the continent or our higher education institutions are training the youth to be innovative enough?
You know, you're touching on something extremely important.
Okay.
According to a report released by the World Economic Forum, some economists and experts are suggesting that countries will be distinguished as innovation poor and innovation rich in this 21st century. So no one is going to say Ghana is rich, is an oil-rich country. What is the innovation index of Ghana? How innovative is Ghana going? That's what will distinguish Ghana, for instance, from another country. So when it comes to innovation, one thing we've been emphasizing, first of all, we should get this straight. Africa has many innovators. People are innovating across the continent. We have more than 300 technology hubs across 93 cities and 42 countries in Africa.
Where are those innovations and how are they transforming lives? Well, in the practical aspect.
Well, in the practical aspect, some of the practical aspect is the mathematical science for early detection of malnutrition. It's in Kenya.
Is it working?
It's working. It's working. Now, you may say we have not yet reached the critical mass yet, because Africa is a continent. It's not just it's not a country. It's a massive continent of 1 billion people. But on innovation, there's something which is important to get right. Sometimes when we think about innovation, we think about when someone comes up with an app, an application, that's innovation. When you repackage, innovation is not repackaging. It's not marketing. So innovation is key in the sense that without research, there's no genuine innovation. 2 quick examples. The reason why we are using what we're using in this studio, it's because one day in 1947, John Bardeen and his colleagues invented the transistor. That's why we have medical imagery and we're using
innovation then.
And the law that govern the fact that we have portable communication equipment like smartphone, like laptops, is the Gordon Moore's law. Gordon Moore's law predicted miniaturization in technology. Those are genuine innovation. And you cannot take this lightly. So we need to train a new generation of scientists who are capable of critical thinking, capable of problem solving, looking around themselves in the communities, in the nation, and come up with creative thinking. But the way our educational systems were designed, they were not designed to train critical thinkers. They were designed to train people who absorb and not necessarily digest, but who come out of the university with book knowledge.
So when we come back from the break, we are going to discuss how we can improve that. Because, of course, obviously, from your submission, there's quite room for improvement.
Absolutely.
All right, viewers, for those who just joined us, this is the AAU Talks on the AAU TV. And with me in the studio is Thierry Zomahoun, who is the CEO and President of the African Institute for Mathematics. Do stay tuned. We'll be back after the break.
Hello, I'm Adeline Adi, Project Officer responsible for the Management Development Training Workshops here at the Association of African Universities, Accra, Ghana. Today I would like to introduce to you our Management Development Training Workshops, which we call MADEV in short. The workshops are targeted at middle-level managers of our universities, so that includes heads of department, deans of faculties, deputy vice chancellors, registrars, bursars, and anyone who aspires to any of these positions. We have a workshop coming up very soon and would be holding in Nairobi, Kenya. It will focus on staff development, staff recruitment, staff retention, and staff motivation issues. The workshop will be facilitated by Professor Pascal Mio, former Executive Director of the Organization for Social Science Research in Africa. Participants would have to pay $500 per head. Participants from Kenya would be paying $300 per head. The workshop will be holding from the 26th to the 29th of June 2018. We are calling out to all our members and anyone who is eligible for this workshop, even if you are not in an AAU member institution, to register for this all-important event. You can register online via our website at blog.aau.org. We are looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you and bye.
Welcome back from the break and thanks for staying tuned. My name is Felicia Kuagbedzi and I'm hosting the AAU Talks and we are live on the AAU TV. Today we are discussing the issue of the youth, higher education and science on the continent. Just before the break, sir, you were talking to us about the issue of innovation and how the system, higher education system on the continent wasn't originally formed or hasn't exactly been producing graduates who are innovators, even though there are some, but there is still room for improvement. How do we really improve the system such that we have people who are coming up with creative and innovative things to solve our African problems?
A number of ways in which we can improve the current process. Okay. And this is what AIMS and other stakeholders are working on, okay, at least the new actors in the higher education system. Number one, let's look at the content. Mm-hmm. The reason why content is key, content and pedagogy. Okay. The way we teach in class, in the classroom must change completely. Mm. And the content of what we're teaching should also be looked at carefully, okay, not in isolation from the outside world, meaning industry, okay, and then government. When you take 7 out of 10 kids who started primary school today, 7 will end up in jobs that had never existed before. Okay. So how are you going to decide what to teach them? Mm. So what to teach is not much about the hardcore content, but about the ability to uplift, bring about the ability in them, okay, to think critically, okay, to strengthen their analytical skills. Okay. Those are cross-cutting skills, okay, regardless of the fields in which you're trained. Okay. When you have it, great, you can maneuver from the banking sector to high-end research, through to energy and the health sector. To medicine, all the people in medicine are not just medical doctors. Okay. There are other actors in the medical field. Great. So number one is content and pedagogy. Okay. The pedagogy meaning the era in which when you're a lecturer, when you are in class, you teach, you talk, and that's it. God's messenger has spoken. Nothing
you don't
else.
Ask questions.
No, you don't ask questions. That era is gone.
Okay.
We must have a learner-centered approach where the learner is his or her own facilitator of acquiring knowledge.
Okay.
Second, it's extremely important, especially when it comes to STEM fields, to increase the representation of women in science.
Exactly.
We've been missing that huge opportunity for decades. It's very important that governments really make that environment possible, and create policies which enable women to not only access higher education, but to go into the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and stay in the STEM fields till the end of their career, and not to slip out when they found a family, just because they can't cope, they have a family, they won't be able to continue with their research career. The third way in which we can improve this is to really bring about the nurture the notion of entrepreneurship in the young people. You don't just study, go to university, or learn something to work for someone else.
For somebody.
You can create your own business, create your own firm, using your skills and knowledge, and be impactful in your communities. So those are the three ways in which we can improve this. But by starting at the very beginning, it's important to have a careful look at, give a careful attention to increasing the pipeline where the kids start school. It's not when they reach university that we'll start intervening.
So you've made mention of 3 points. I would like to do follow-up questions. Let me start from the last one, which was on entrepreneurship. Universities on the continent, are they really implementing entrepreneurship? Do they really know what it means to be an entrepreneur? Is it really about introducing courses in entrepreneurship, or are they doing well in terms of the practical aspect of it? Let's take a look at that.
This is a good question. And one could say, without being provocative, that it's not the university's responsibility to train entrepreneurs. Actually,
is that?
Yes, the traditional role of universities is not to train entrepreneurs. It is because we're witnessing a paradigm shift in this 21st century that universities have no choice but to look at how to train people who are employable immediately, who have the skills to be market and industry ready, and who have the ability to start up something. You see? So in doing so, university has to partner with other stakeholders. This is why at AIMS we're talking about the AIMS, the knowledge ecosystem. In that ecosystem, where you have learning institutions, you also have venture capitalists that you need to attract in that ecosystem. You have the private sector, which is there. You have lab infrastructure. Give a quick example. When you're a young man, a young girl, young woman with a bright idea, you want to set up your own business. Let's say in the medical field, you invented a device. Or like this young alumnus from AIMS who invented like a drone to help deliver services like the one we're witnessing and we have in Rwanda to deliver blood packs. When you have it and you don't know who to go to market and sell to commercialize this, and you have no investors because you yourself are not financially independent, there's no way to go to. So the ecosystem, the approach of ecosystem is key to nurture the entrepreneurship in the young graduates, in the young people across the continent. That's number one. Number two, it's extremely important to keep in mind when you look at the innovation value chain, you have 2 steps, starting with the pipeline. You have the idea generation and idea valorization. The second idea valorization. You generate idea. Now you want to pilot the idea. You want to commercialize the idea. Experts tell us that between piloting between where you get the idea correct, your idea correct, and you want to pilot and market the idea. There's a gap which some people refer to as the valley of death.
Okay.
Valley of death.
What is that?
Some others say valley of hope. What is that? Is that taking ideas and translate it into product and services. Okay. Many ideas die there. Okay. Many research output die there. Simply there. They don't go far enough. But
and what's the cause?
The cause is that it's a number of things. Two reasons. Number one, research and development, which is the reason why in the knowledge ecosystem, you need to invest heavily in research and development. Okay. We might talk about that. Yes. Government has committed 1% to invest in R&D and higher education. Are they doing it? Well, I'm not sure if they're doing it. So if you're not investing, if you're a young research scientist and you want to commercialize your idea, you have no source of getting enough input from R&D system, infrastructure, you're not going to be able to afford the R&D. Second, you don't have the funding, the finance you need, the investment you need to market the idea. You don't have a partner who can bring in the investment. Okay. The idea will die there. And then third, it's a policy environment. If the policy of the country is not conducive for marketing lab product, lab ideas, or research ideas, the idea will die there. So three things: investment, R&D, and the policy. Okay.
So let me follow up from the point where you spoke about policy, which means governments do really have a key role to play in terms of creating the conducive environment for this to happen. Now, let's look at investment in higher education by government. Yeah. Earlier, you made mention of the 1% and investment in higher education. I remember this is in relation to the Lagos Plan of Action in 1981, where government all committed that they are going to invest about 1% of their GDP into research and development. Yeah. Is this happening, or they just paid lip service? How is it? Is this really shaping or turning out? How come they are not even doing it?
This is not happening. Government committed as part of the Lagos Plan of Action. Yes. 1% of their GDP. No single African country is doing it.
Not a single one.
Not a single one. The only one who is planning to reach that target is South Africa by 2020. Okay. That's one. A. B. When you look at the countries which are performing very well, look at Japan, the G8 country. Yes. Almost all of them are putting in more than 3% of GDP in R&D. So if we Africans are serious about the transformation we are hoping to get in Africa, if we're serious, we've got no choice but to quickly catch up on that delay, on that gap of not committing at least 1% of our GDP into R&D.
I was about to ask you whether that 1% is even ambitious enough.
I think for a start, if you look at the time it took for them to get where they are, I think compared with to a GDP of a nation, of a country, it's sizable. Is it enough? Not enough for a big country like Africa, but at least, if at least 3/4 of Africa's government could reach that target of 1% of their GDP, I think we'd begin to see some changes. Now, there's the execution side of it. Exactly. You get 1%, but how are you going to manage that 1%? Who is going to execute? If that 1% doesn't go into the waste of bureaucracy, heavy bureaucracy,
and corruption, maybe.
And corruption. Yeah. So we must make sure, while we say 1%, that 1% of GDP into R&D is not just a slogan. Okay. That the 1% just reaches the research scientists.
Those are very interesting submissions. We also know you are the chair of the next Einstein Forum. Can you please brief us about that forum? What is it about?
5 years ago, we took a stock of all the major scientific events happening around the globe. Okay. You can mention the STS Forum in Japan, the AAAS in the US, in North America, and the ESOF in Europe.
Okay.
And one of the feedback we got from young African scientists was to say, each time we were trying to go abroad to participate in one of those forums and then share our ideas and research output, it's almost challenging.
Okay.
Challenging for simple reason, get a visa. Simple visa for an African research scientist to go to the States. And present. So we thought about, number one,
okay,
one of the ways in which we could solve that is to provide our young African research scientists who are doing breakthrough science, cutting-edge science, high-end research, inventing things, our innovators, providing them with a Pan-African, with a global platform to showcase their discovery, their inventions. The Next Einstein Forum is a global platform for science in Africa, to showcase Africa's genius. You know that Africa is the world's greatest pool of untapped genius. So we want to shed light on our young scientists. Second, by doing that, we're trying to solve a problem. The problem of bringing the worlds of scientists to Africa, to them, instead of them fighting individually to get a visa to go out there. So this is what the Next Einstein Forum is about. The Next Einstein Forum is a number of key sub-initiatives, which includes building a powerful, dynamic African community of scientists. This community will be a powerhouse of solutions, scientific and technological solutions for governments across the continent. Second, trying to influence conducive policies for STEM fields. And then lastly, try to raise awareness about the importance of science in a nation or a continent and the transformation of a nation or a continent.
That's great. Can you tell us about some of the previous ones you held? Where did you hold them? Who were the participants, apart from the scientists who present? Which other stakeholders do participate?
We had the first edition of the Next Einstein Forum in Dakar, in Senegal, in 2016, where we had over 1,200 people participant. More than 50% of them under the age of 40. And 50%, nearly 50% of the participants are women. It's important to mention that. So it was a forum built on the idea that we can celebrate what is happening across Africa, scientifically and technologically speaking, and bringing Africa to the cutting edge of global science. The goal, strategic goal over a certain period of time is to make of Africa the global hub for the 21st century science. So recently in March in 2018, we organized the second edition of the Next Einstein Forum in Kigali, in Rwanda. We welcome
the president was there.
His Excellency President Macky Sall was there, and His Excellency President Paul Kagame hosted the event. So both presidents were there. We had 1,600 participants from nearly 100 countries around the globe. We had 54 science ambassadors, one per each country in Africa, and 20 Next Einstein Fellows. The Next Einstein Fellows are young African scientists under the age of 42 who are doing superstellar research. Research which we anticipate will transform the field of research on the continent.
When is the next one being
The
held?
next one is happening in Nairobi.
When is that?
In 2020, in March 2020. And we will keep informing our stakeholders. And then we'll be happy to welcome you there.
We will surely be there. So we are ending up our discussion. We would like to take your final words to stakeholders of higher education. So we'll take that and then we'll end the session.
Well, thanks for having me at the Association of African Universities. I think we've come to a stage where we need to reinvent the university of the 21st century. This is what AIMS has been endeavoring to do, to make happen over the past 15 plus years. And we need to increase the representation of women in the STEM fields at the higher education level, but keeping in mind that we have to increase the pipeline from early stage at primary school level. The third message here, which is crucially important, is for more investment to be done, put on research and development and higher education, especially high-end research, research that will tackle community and national problems across the continent. Continue to work on our partnership with governments across Africa and policymakers, but also trying to really build these Pan-African ecosystems that we're working on, getting involved, private sector, industry, policymakers, venture capitalists, higher education learning institutions around the cause of transformation through science.
All right, viewers, this has been another exciting edition of the AAU Talks. We've hosted Thierry Zomahoun, who is the CEO and President of the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. He's also the chair of the next Einstein Forum, and he's actually taking us through quite a lot of things in terms of how higher education on the continent currently is and how we can improve it. He also made mention of the various roles to be played by various players, the higher education institutions, the government, as well as industry and all other stakeholders. Thank you for staying tuned. My name is Felicia Kuagbedzi, and this has been the AAU Talks, coming to you live from the studio of the AAU TV here in the Association of the African Universities. Thank you.